Who are the NFL's top 5 running backs of all time? For me, the list starts with Jim Brown. He may be the greatest running back ever. He's an 8-time unanimous All-NFL selection, went to 9 Pro Bowls, was the Rookie of the Year, a 4-time league MVP, and he never missed a game in his short 9-year career. While longevity isn't on his side, what he did in those 9 years might be the most dominant stretch and accomplished stretch of a running back ever. Then we have Barry Sanders. If you want to make Jim Brown 1A and Barry 1B or vice versa, no argument for me. He was perhaps the most electric player to ever play the running back position. He is the answer to the question, what could have been if Barry Sanders never retired? We'll never know, and we were probably cheated out of a lot of highlight reels. He led the league in rushing 4 times. He led the league in touchdowns 2 times. He's an 8-time All-Pro and had 10 consecutive years of 1,000 or more rushing yards. His entire career was 10 years. He averaged 1,500 plus yards a season for his entire career. Barry Sanders, without question, is one of the greatest running backs ever. Now, despite the controversy off the field and the infamous white Bronco, O.J. Simpson also makes this list purely for what he did as a running back for the Buffalo Bills. He was the first ever player to reach 2,000 yards in a single season. He's a 6-time Pro Bowler, a 5-time All-Pro, 1-time league MVP, and a 4-time rushing champion in the NFL. It's impossible to mention the running back position in the history of this game and not talk about the accomplishments of O.J. Simpson, one of the first prolific runners that we have seen. We will never have a list of running backs and leave off sweetness Walter Payton. Walter Payton may be considered one of the greatest all-around running backs ever. He was the NFL career rushing leader until 2002 when Emmett Smith broke the record, and we'll get to him in a minute. He is now 2nd all-time in career rushing yards. He's 4th all-time with 110 rushing touchdowns. He's a 7-time All-Pro, 1-time MVP, and a Super Bowl 20 champion. Walter Payton was one of the most fearless running backs to play the position. He was known for never running out of bounds, hoping to impose punishment on the would-be tacklers looking to take him down, and that worked. Walter Payton, for a long time, was considered the greatest running back, and he certainly makes the list of top 5 ever. And rounding out this list, a more modern candidate, I've put Adrian Peterson on the list, probably the best running back of the last 20 to 30 years. He's 5th all-time in rushing yards, 4th all-time in rushing touchdowns, a 3-time league rushing champion, a 2-time rushing touchdown champion. He's the record holder for most rushing yards in a single game, most 60-plus yard touchdown runs in a career. He is tied with Barry Sanders, also on this list, for most 50-plus yard touchdown runs in a single season. He is tied with O.J. Simpson, also on this list, for most 200-yard rushing games in a career. He's a 1-time league MVP, one of the last players who doesn't play the quarterback position to win the award back in 2012. He's a 1-time Offensive Player of the Year. He won the Rookie of the Year, and he's a 7-time All-Pro. We cannot talk about the full scope and history of this position without mentioning Adrian Peterson. Now, you may ask yourselves, how did I leave off the all-time rushing leader in Emmett Smith? And the reality is pretty simple. Emmett Smith doesn't stack up even close as a running back to the other players on this list. He only had 3 seasons of 1,500 plus yards. That was less than every single player on this list. His best single season of 1,770 yards was less than every other person on this list. His best single season in yards per game was less than every single person on this list. His career yards per game was less than every single person on this list. His career yards per attempt were less than everyone on this list. His single season high of 5.3 yards per attempt was less than every single person on this list. In fact, his career yards per attempt of 4.2 is less than every single person on this list. And in fact, none of this can even be considered due to his environment, something that greats like Barry Sanders had to overcome. Because in fact, he had maybe the best environment any running back has ever had. He had the greatest offensive line at all time. He had a Hall of Fame quarterback and a Hall of Fame wide receiver to take the defense's focus off of him. Not only, in my opinion, is Emmett Smith not a top 5 running back, he would not make my top 10 list. In fact, there are only 1 or 2 running backs who would make a top 10 list that in rushing stats alone, he doesn't have more than. He's less than almost everybody you could potentially put on that list, and certainly less than everybody here on this list, minus the cumulative career rushing yards.